Ever feel like the first chapter of a book, it's like kind of like a keyhole you can peek through
Oh, I see what you mean.
into someone's like inner world?
Yeah.
That's what we're doing today.
Okay.
Sort of diving right into Demons at Dawn, which is the first chapter of Little Dragon, The Reckoning.
Right.
And what makes this one so interesting, well, one of the things, is that it's a true story.
Mm-hmm.
It's about this man named Hung, who we later get to know as, the legendary Master Wong.
And it's amazing how the way this first chapter, it doesn't just tell us about Hung's life, right?
Yeah.
During the Vietnam War.
Mm-hmm.
But it uses that whole backdrop to get at something so much bigger, I think. It's really about fear.
That's what I thought was so clever.
Yeah.
You think with a title like Demons at Dawn, that it's going to be, literally about the enemy soldiers.
Yeah, right, exactly.
But it's like the author uses that word demons as this metaphor to represent like all the different shapes that fear can take.
Exactly, yeah.
Especially for a kid, like Hung.
Yeah, and the source material, it emphasizes over and over again how layered Hung's experience with fear actually is.
Oh, totally.
You've got the obvious danger of war, which is ever present, but it goes so much deeper than that,
So sure.
Imagine being part of a Vietnamese-Chinese family at that time.
Right.
Stuck between those two worlds. It's like this feeling of never quite belonging.
Oh, yeah.
Of always being seen as different, as an outsider.
Yeah.
And that in itself creates a kind of fear.
It's true. It's like the demons, they aren't just out there on the battlefield.
Yeah, exactly.
They're woven into like every part of their lives,
And then on top of all that, you've got the conflict within his own family.
Oh, right.
It's a lot for anyone to handle, especially a young boy. You really start to see how these different kinds of fear, these demons, they begin to shape how Hung sees the world.
It makes you think, like, how often do those early experiences we have with fear, especially as kids, how much of that just stays with us,
Mm-hmm.
So I'm curious, when you were reading this chapter, how did you see Hung dealing with all this?
Well, one thing that really struck me was how the author handled that the whole thing with Hung being of mixed heritage.
Yeah.
It wasn't just like a background detail, right.
It was like this constant tension that ran through everything, this feeling of like never quite fitting in anywhere.
It's like being caught between two different worlds.
Yeah.
Never fully belonging to either one.
Right. And on a deeper level, it makes you think about how much we all crave that sense of belonging.
Totally.
That need to feel accepted for who we are.
Oh, absolutely.
And the story doesn't shy away from like the emotional toll that kind of exclusion takes,
Yeah.
It really makes you wonder, how do they even begin to make sense of those feelings?
It's a lot to carry around for sure. And speaking of heavy stuff, the chapter also does this really interesting thing where it shows us these two totally different ways of dealing with fear. Like you've got Hung's father, right, who just wants to run to escape the danger.
Yeah. Which, I mean, come on, that's like a totally human instinct, right?
Totally.
Especially when you're talking about war.
You bet.
When survival often means being able to just get away.
It makes perfect sense.
Right, but then you have this like almost mythical figure of Master Cheen.
Right.
And he embodies this completely opposite approach.
Right.
It's all about facing your fears head on.
It's interesting, right? Because the story doesn't really say if one way is better than the other.
That's true.
It's more about acknowledging how complex fear is.
Yeah.
And how differently we all cope with it.
It's like Hung is caught in the middle of these two opposing forces,
Yeah, I see what you mean.
Two totally different guides for navigating a world that just feels full of fear. It's a tough spot to be in, and I think it's something that we can all relate to.
Yeah.
Like at some point we all have to ask ourselves, when fear comes knocking, what do we do? Do we run and hide, or do we face it head on?
It's the age-old question, isn't it?
Right. And what I love is that in Little Dragon, The Reckoning, we see how those early experiences that Hung has with fear, with his identity, with all those survival strategies, they really set the stage for everything that's to come.
They really do.
I mean, they really lay the foundation for the man he'll eventually become.
Exactly. And as we get deeper into this book, we're going to see how those themes develop, how they evolve.
It's going to be good.
It's going to be fascinating to see where he ends up.
And, speaking of those, like, really powerful, formative moments? There's this one part towards the end of the chapter where it feels like something shifts for Hung.
Yeah.
Like we get this little glimpse of like the strength that he's eventually going to embody as Master Wong.
Right. You're talking about the part with the villager.
Yes.
Who sacrifices himself.
Yes.
So that everyone else can get away.
Exactly.
God, that scene always gets me.
That's powerful.
It's like, for Hung to see that at such a young age, it's like Master Chien's teachings,
Right.
They're not just words anymore.
Right, it's real.
They become like this living example right in front of him.
Yeah.
That true strength that's not about not being afraid.
Right.
It's about being terrified.
Yeah.
But doing what needs to be done anyway.
It's such a powerful contrast to what his dad's doing,
It really is.
Just trying to escape.
Yeah.
Makes you think about like how we define courage, What does it really mean to be brave?
Yeah. And for each of us, it might be different,
Totally. What are those moments in our lives that really test us?
Exactly, where we have to face our fears head on.
And it's not always, life or death situations like Hung's dealing with.
Right.
But those everyday challenges, they can feel just as huge sometimes.
Totally. They can feel insurmountable.
Exactly.
And I think that's one of the things this chapter does so well. It doesn't give you any easy answers, It doesn't say, okay, here's the right way to deal with fear.
Right.
It shows you the struggle, the internal battle that Hung's going through. And it invites us to kind of like have that same conversation with ourselves,
It's like this chapter isn't just setting the stage for Hung's life.
Yeah.
It's almost like it's giving us a framework for understanding how we all deal with these things.
I think that's a really good point.
Like for recognizing those demons.
Yeah.
Those fears, the doubts.
Absolutely.
All that stuff.
Yeah, those things that can hold us back.
And trying to figure out how to face them,
And Hung's journey, it's just beginning, let me tell you.
Oh, I know. I can't wait to see what happens next.
There are more challenges ahead, more demons to confront, but it's those lessons, the ones he's learning now, those are going to stay with him.
Totally.
They're going to shape who he becomes.
For sure. This has been quite a deep dive, wouldn't you say?
It really has. It's amazing how much one chapter can reveal.
Right.
About a person's life, about the world, really.
So much to think about, huh?
A lot to unpack there.
Well, thanks for joining us for this deep dive into Little Dragon, The Reckoning. It's amazing how much we can learn from just one chapter, one little slice of a life. And until next time, remember to keep exploring, keep questioning, and most importantly, keep those deep dives going.